I want to take you back a bit, way back. We're in the year 8 AD.
Okay.
We're in the ancient Roman world, and the poet Ovid is sitting down to write what will become, his masterpiece, the Metamorphoses.
Right.
And he decides to tell the story about a specific young man, a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy is just physically stunning. I mean, the kind of beauty that would stop traffic, or I guess stop chariots back then.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also emotionally impenetrable, just cold. He rejects everyone who claims to love him, leaving this trail of broken hearts and spurned lovers deep in the forest.
It's really the classic setup for a tragedy, isn't it? You have this beautiful, completely unreachable figure who thinks he's above the whole human condition of love and connection.
Totally.
And in the myth, the gods, specifically Nemesis, the goddess of revenge, they decide that, this arrogance has gone on for long enough. She curses him.
The curse is so specific.
It is, and it's so cruel when you really think about it. He's doomed to fall in love, but never, ever to have his love returned.
So the trap is set. As the story goes, this young hunter, he comes upon a pristine pool of water. It's perfectly still, like glass. He leans over to get a drink, sees a face in the water, and is just instantly, violently captivated.
But he doesn't realize he's looking at himself.
Not at all. He thinks it's a water spirit or some beautiful stranger. He tries to kiss the water, but the second he touches the surface, the image just shatters. He pulls back, it returns, and he reaches out again. The beloved vanishes.
He just stays there.
Day after day, pining away, can't eat, can't sleep, until he literally just wastes away into death. And that young man's name, of course, was Narcissus.
And from that one 2,000-year-old myth, we get one of the most loaded, overused, and frankly weaponized words in our entire modern vocabulary. Narcissist.
That is exactly what I want to tackle today. Because if you open up TikTok or Twitter or just, eavesdrop on a brunch conversation, narcissist has become this catch-all term.
Oh, absolutely.
It means my ex who is a jerk, or someone who takes way too many selfies, or that boss who didn't give me a raise. It's just become a synonym for vanity or just being unpleasant.
It really has. It's the pop culture villain of the decade. We diagnose people from, miles away based on a bad text message. But for this deep dive, we are stripping all of that away.
Getting back to the source.
We're going back to the source material, specifically the clinical and scientific literature around what is called Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD. We're moving away from the colloquial insult and looking at the actual machinery of the disorder.
And when you look at that machinery, it's not just about a guy loving his own reflection, is it?
Not at all. In fact, that reflection story is almost misleading because it implies self-love. The clinical reality is about a person who has a fractured, deeply unstable sense of self, who can't connect with others, and who, according to the data, is often suffering or causing immense suffering in ways that are so much more complex than just having a big ego.
So our mission today is to really peel back that label. We're going to look at the brain structure, the genetics, which I think are going to surprise a lot of people.
Oh, definitely.
The tragic paradoxes and even the diagnosis wars that almost tore the entire psychiatric community apart.
And we're going to cover the shy narcissist, the so-called saintly narcissist, and the biological reality of why they do what they do.
Okay, so let's define the scope for you, the listener. We are treating the source material, the comprehensive documentation on the disorder, as our roadmap. And if you think you know what a narcissist looks like, loud, arrogant, braggadocious, you might be missing half the picture.
Because sometimes the most dangerous narcissist is the quietest person in the room.
That's a chilling thought. Okay, let's unpack this. If a clinician is sitting down with a patient, what are the actual boxes that need to be ticked? What is the clinical portrait of NPD?
Well, historically and clinically, we look at what you could call the big four core characteristics. These are really the pillars. If you don't have these, you don't have the disorder. The first, and the one everyone knows, is grandiosity.
Grandiosity. So, I am the greatest.
It's more than just confidence. It's a distortion of reality. It's an exaggerated sense of self-importance where the person believes they are inherently superior, unique, or, destined for greatness that others just can't comprehend.
So it's not, I'm good at math.
No, it's, I am a mathematical genius, and regular teachers can't possibly understand my gift.
Got it. It separates them from the common people.
Correct. And that leads directly to the second pillar, entitlement. This is the belief that the world owes you something. It's this unreasonable expectation of especially favorable treatment. The rules apply to you, but they don't apply to me because I'm special.
So this is the person who cuts the line at the airport, not because they're in a rush, but because they genuinely believe that standing in line is just beneath them.
Precisely. And they're baffled if you call them out on it. They give you that, don't you know who I am? Like, even if nobody knows who they are.
Right.
Then we have the third pillar, which is, I would argue, the most destructive. Low empathy.
This is the big one.
Right.
But does low empathy mean they're robots? That they feel nothing?
No, and we'll get into the nuance of this later because it is absolutely fascinating. But diagnostically, it's defined as an unwillingness or an inability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. It's like being colorblind to human emotion.
So you tell them your dog died.
And they look at you and say, okay, but are we still going to dinner? It's just a missing circuit.
Wow. And the fourth?
Interpersonal difficulties. Which is just the natural result of the first three. If you're grandiose, you're entitled, and you lack empathy, your relationships are going to hit a wall. They're usually superficial or exploitative or just incredibly turbulent. They can't maintain long-term healthy bonds because a bond requires mutuality, and NPD is inherently one-sided.
Now, where does this sit in the grand scheme of mental health? I hear the term cluster B thrown around all the time on social media. Stay away from cluster Bs. What neighborhood are we actually in here?
So the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it groups personality disorders into clusters based on shared traits. NPD falls into cluster B.
Okay.
And this is the cluster that's described as the dramatic, emotional, or erratic disorders. So NPD shares this space with borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder.
So it's a high conflict neighborhood.
Extremely high conflict. The whole vibe of cluster B is emotional dysregulation and real difficulty with impulse control. But I want to pause here for a second because there's a crucial distinction we have to make.
Okay.
A lot of successful, highly functional people have these traits. You can be grandiose and entitled and be a Fortune 500 CEO or a huge movie star.
Right. We almost expect our rock stars to be narcissists. We kind of reward it.
We do. We reward it. But the DSM has a very strict rule. It's only a disorder when these traits are inflexible, maladaptive, persisting, and cause significant functional impairment or subjective distress.
That's the threshold.
That's the normalcy versus disorder threshold. If you're arrogant, but you have a happy marriage, you hold down a job, and you generally get along with people, you might be a jerk, but you don't have NPD. NPD requires that your life is messy because of your personality.
There's an interesting paradox mentioned in the sources regarding ambition. You'd think, with all this grandiosity, I am destined for greatness, that narcissists would always be high achievers. They'd be the ones taking the biggest risks.
Right, you'd expect that.
But the sources say that's not always the case.
No, it's the paradox of ambition. While that overconfidence often does fuel ambition, people with NPD are often terrified of failure, or, more specifically, they're terrified of the appearance of failure.
Because failure would shatter the grandiosity.
Exactly. It's a house of cards.
So they play it safe.
They often avoid risks. They won't apply for the big promotion if there's even a 10% chance they won't get it, because not getting it would be a narcissistic injury they just can't handle. So you see a lot of people with NPD who underachieve. They talk a huge game, I could have run this company. But they never actually put themselves in the arena. They want the accolades without the risk.
It's a fragility hidden behind all that armor.
Yeah.
And that leads us perfectly into the next segment, because I think the biggest misconception, and the one I certainly had before reading this source material, is that all narcissists act the same way. We think of the loud bragger. But the sources describe two very distinct faces of this disorder.
This is absolutely critical for the listener to understand. If you are only looking for the loud narcissist, you are going to miss the quiet one who might be just as destructive. We tend to think of the thick-skinned, grandiose narcissist. This is the archetype.
The Tony Stark type, or maybe that's too generous because Tony, has a heart deep down.
Maybe think more of the corporate raider or the reality TV star who thrives on conflict. This type is arrogant, socially dominant, exhibitionistic. They believe they're unique. They believe others are envious of them. And here's the kicker. Psychologically, these thick-skinned types often report feeling good.
Wait, they don't suffer?
They report higher levels of psychological well-being. They don't have anxiety. They don't have depression. They walk into a room and they own it. because their delusion is working. They truly, genuinely believe they are better than everyone else.
So the disorder isn't painful for them.
Exactly. The suffering is all externalized. They don't suffer. Their spouses, their employees, their children suffer. They're the hurricane, and everyone else is just getting wet.
That is terrifying. But then there's the other side, and this was the real aha moment for me. The thin-skinned or vulnerable narcissist.
Yes. This is the type that flies completely under the radar. Vulnerable narcissism looks very, very different on the surface. These individuals are often shy, they can be introverted, they are hypersensitive to criticism, they struggle with these deep feelings of shame and inferiority.
But hold on. If they're shy and they feel inferior, how are they narcissists? Doesn't that contradict the whole grandiosity rule?
That's the paradox. The core machinery is identical. They still have extremely high entitlement. They still have that intense self-focus. But instead of saying, I am the king, look at me, the internal monologue is, I am the misunderstood genius. I am special, but the world just refuses to recognize it.
So it's a victim narrative, but it's a superior victim narrative.
Precisely. I am suffering more than anyone else because I am so deep, so unique, so sensitive. It's still all about them. And unlike the thick-skinned type, the vulnerable narcissist is chemically extremely volatile. They are prone to what's called narcissistic rage when they feel rejected.
The sources mention that this vulnerable type is highly correlated with neuroticism, whereas the grandiose type is linked to agentic extroversion. Can you break those terms down for us?
Sure. So neuroticism is essentially a tendency toward negative emotion, anxiety, worry, anger, moodiness. The vulnerable narcissist is miserable. They are constantly scanning the room for slights. Did that person look at me the wrong way? Why didn't they laugh at my joke? They interpret totally neutral events as personal attacks.
And agentic extroversion.
That's the drive for reward, dominance, and achievement. The grandiose narcissist assumes everyone loves them, or if they don't, they're just jealous haters. They have this buffer against the world.
Right.
The vulnerable narcissist has no buffer. They're an exposed nerve.
Is it possible to be both? Or are you sort of locked into one lane?
This is a subject of debate called fluctuation theory. The evidence suggests that people with the vulnerable profile often oscillate up into grandiosity. They might have a moment where they feel on top of the world, maybe they get a big compliment, and for an hour, they're the grandiose king.
And then they crash.
Then something happens, a perceived slight, and they crash right back down into shame.
What about the grandiose types? Did they ever crash?
Rarely. The data shows grandiose types very rarely show vulnerability. They seem to have a much more stable, albeit diluted, self-image. So you're right, the vulnerable ones are riding this emotional roller coaster, and the grandiose ones are driving the roller coaster off the tracks while smiling for the camera.
I want to circle back to the empathy piece, because low empathy feels like such a damning label, and I think a lot of listeners might worry, do I have low empathy? Does it mean they literally cannot feel? Or is it that they choose not to?
This is where we have to be really clinically precise, because the popular understanding is just wrong. We have to distinguish between emotional empathy and cognitive empathy.
Okay, break that down for us.
Emotional empathy is feeling what you feel. If I see you crying and I feel a physical pang of sadness in my own chest, that's emotional empathy. It's a visceral, contagion of emotion. It happens automatically for most of us.
And cognitive empathy.
Cognitive empathy is knowing what you feel. It's intellectual. It's looking at you and computing. Oh, he's crying. Water's coming out of his eyes. His face is contorted. Therefore, he is sad. It's just data processing.
So where's the deficit in NPD?
The evidence shows that people with NPD have significant deficits in emotional empathy. They don't catch the feeling. If you're crying, they don't feel sad. They might even feel annoyed or impatient. However, their cognitive empathy is often preserved. They know you're sad, they just don't feel it.
Which actually makes them effective manipulators, right? Because if I know what buttons to push to make you react, but I don't feel bad about hurting you.
That is the dangerous combination. If you have zero empathy at all, you're just confused by people. If you have cognitive empathy but no emotional empathy, you can be a predator. You can feign concern perfectly because you know what concern is supposed to look like.
There's a fascinating study mentioned in the source material, the instruction study. This really blew my mind regarding that ability versus choice debate.
This is a crucial piece of research. Researchers hooked participants up to brain scanners and showed them images of people in distress. For the MPD group, initially, the empathy centers of the brain were just quiet, a flat line.
So no automatic response.
Right. But then the researchers gave a specific instruction. They said, I want you to imagine this is you, or try to take this person's perspective, and suddenly the brain lit up. the hardware fired.
So the hardware works, it's not actually broken.
The hardware is there.
Right.
But the software isn't auto-running. The deficit seems to be motivational. They can empathize, they just don't care to unless there's a specific reason to do so. In a neurotypical brain, empathy is a reflex. In a narcissistic brain, it's a manual overriding switch that they rarely, if ever, bother to flip.
That brings up the selfish altruist concept. They can do good things, but the engine driving the behavior is completely different.
Completely different. They are much less likely to be pro-social, meaning helpful or kind, unless it improves their status. If a narcissist donates $1 million to charity, they want the giant check, the gala, and the building named after them.
They're not donating anonymously.
Very rarely. The act of giving isn't about the recipient at all. It's about the donor's public image.
Is there a brain explanation for this self-obsession? Or is it just personality?
Oh, there's a neurological underpinning. Neuroscientists have looked at the salience network in the brain. You can think of this as the brain's traffic controller. It decides what's important enough to pay attention to.
Okay, so it filters the world.
In a neurotypical brain, when you interact with someone, your default mode network, which is the part of the brain responsible for daydreaming and self-reflection, it switches off. The salience network says, hey, stop thinking about yourself. Listen to this person.
And in NPD?
In NPD, that switch is faulty. The salience network fails to deactivate the default mode network. So even when they're looking right at you, listening to your story of woe, they are literally, neurologically, still stuck in their own heads.
Wow.
They're processing self-related information. How do I look while listening to this? When is it my turn to speak? Is this person boring me?
They are trapped in the echo chamber of the self. That explains that glazed over look you sometimes see when you're talking to someone who just wants you to finish so they can start talking.
That is exactly what is happening biologically.
Okay, so we've got the behavior and we've got the brain mechanism. But the big question, the one everyone always asks is, are they born this way?
Yeah.
Or did their parents make them this way? The classic nature versus nurture debate.
This is where the data really flips the script on conventional wisdom. We have this deep-seated Freudian idea that narcissism comes from a mother who didn't hug you enough, or a father who was too critical. We want to blame the parent's behavior.
Right. It's the mother's fault. That's the old cliche.
But modern science points very, very strongly to genetics and neurobiology.
Really? So it's not just bad parenting?
Well, let's look at the twin studies. These are the gold standard for separating genes from environment. Researchers look at identical twins who share 100% of their DNA and fraternal twins who share about 50%.
Mm-hmm.
If identical twins are more alike in narcissism than fraternal twins, it points to genetics. And when you run the complex statistical analysis, the reviews show a major contribution of genes.
But the environment must play some role.
It does, but probably not the way you think. The non-shared environment matters a lot. These are the random things that happen to one twin but not the other.
Different teachers, different friends.
Exactly. A random illness, a specific trauma, different friend groups, these random life events shape us.
Okay.
But here is the real shocker. The shared environment, which includes parenting style, the home life, socioeconomic status, all the things both twins experienced equally, showed little or no influence on developing NPD.
Wait, pause there. You are saying that how you parent your child, whether you're strict, lenient, warm, cold, has little or no influence on whether they become a narcissist. That feels wrong. That feels counterintuitive to everything we're told about child rearing.
It feels very counterintuitive, and this is why we have to understand a concept called genetic confounding. This was highlighted by the psychologist Sven Torgerson, and it is a massive wrench in the gears of traditional psychology.
Unpack that for us, because I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay, let's imagine a scenario. You have a father who is cold, distant, and critical. He has a son who grows up to be a cold, distant, narcissistic adult.
Right. The standard assumption is the cold father caused the son to be that way.
Bad parenting caused a bad outcome. But Torgerson asks, who is the father? The father is a man with genes. If the father is cold and critical, he likely has narcissistic or depressive traits himself written right there in his DNA, and he passes those genes to his son.
So the son inherited the coldness genes.
Exactly. The father provided the environment, which was coldness, and the genes for coldness. The genetic confounding theory suggests that the parenting style didn't cause the disorder. The parenting style was just a symptom of the parent's own genetic makeup, which he passed on.
Oh, wow.
The child would have likely developed those traits even if he were raised by a different, warmer parent because the blueprint was already there.
That is a mind-bending loop. So the bad parenting and the child's disorder are both just branches of the same genetic tree. It's not cause and effect. It's a shared origin.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this absolves a lot of parents who carry immense guilt. And it also complicates things for people who want to believe they can love the narcissism out of a child. If it's structural and genetic, it's much, much harder to shift.
And biologically, we see these structural deviations you mentioned earlier.
We do. We see that gray matter volume is consistently lower in the medial prefrontal cortex. You can think of the medial prefrontal cortex as the brain's mirror. It's where you look at yourself and reflect. In a narcissist, that mirror is physically smaller or maybe foggy. The hardware for self-reflection is literally atrophied.
And for the vulnerable types, there was a mention of oxidative stress.
Yes, specifically for vulnerable narcissism, they show increased oxidative stress in the body. And this links right back to that high neuroticism. If you're in a constant state of fight or flight, constantly scanning for insults, constantly jealous, your body is just flooded with cortisol. It physically wears down the cells. It's tragic, really. It's written in the code and the cells.
I want to broaden the picture a bit because we talked about the two main phases, grandiose and vulnerable. But the source material lists some other subtypes that are really specific and really fascinating, specifically the communal narcissist.
Ah, the saintly narcissist. This is the one that tricks everyone.
How do you spot them?
This is the person who is always volunteering, always leading the charity drive, always the mom of the friend group. They are ostentatiously self-sacrificing.
But isn't that a good thing? We want people to volunteer.
The behavior is good. The motivation is the problem. Their motivation is the same as the guy buying the Ferrari. It's power and admiration. But instead of saying, I'm the richest, they say, I'm the most helpful, I'm the most moral, I am the best person here.
So if you don't praise them for it.
That's the tell. If you don't praise their helpfulness, or worse, if you challenge their method of helping, hey, maybe we should do the charity drive this way instead. The mask slips. You see the rage, you see the entitlement. After all I've done for you, they weaponize their kindness.
Then we have the darkest corner of the spectrum, the malignant narcissist.
This term was coined by Eric Fromm. This is a cocktail. You take narcissistic personality disorder and you mix in antisocial personality disorder, which we used to call sociopathy, paranoia, and sadism.
Sadism, meaning they actually enjoy inflicting pain.
Yes. Unlike the standard narcissist who hurts you because they're indifferent to your feelings, they step on you because you're in the way, the malignant narcissist might hurt you because it makes them feel powerful. They enjoy the control. And the sources note something very frightening about this type. As they achieve things, their disorder tends to worsen.
Usually people mellow out with success.
Yeah.
If you get what you want, you kind of chill out.
Not here, because the power feeds the paranoia. Now that I'm on top, everyone wants to take it from me. It feeds the entitlement. It just confirms their worldview that they are superior and everyone else is an enemy or a tool. This is the profile of the dictator.
And then there's the high-functioning or exhibitionistic type theorized by Glenn Gabbard.
This is that successful archetype we see in business. Competitive, sexually provocative, adaptive functioning. They use their narcissistic traits, that drive, that need to win to succeed. They often have very few psychological issues, no depression, no anxiety, but they are rigid perfectionists.
So they look perfect on paper.
They do, but their interpersonal relationships are usually a complete disaster. They cycle through spouses, they're estranged from their kids, they have no real friends, just associates. It seems like interpersonal disaster is the common thread that runs across all these subtypes.
This brings us to the diagnosis wars. Reading the history of this in the source material, it sounds like the psychiatrists were having a bit of a brawl over how to define this. It wasn't just some quiet academic meeting.
Oh, it was a massive controversy. It was essentially a bar fight in the academic world. Leading up to the publication of the DSM-5 in 2013, the committee actually recommended removing NPD as a distinct diagnosis.
Wait, they were going to delete narcissism, just erase it.
They were. They argued that the definition was too messy, too focused on the external loud traits and missing the internal suffering. They wanted to fold it into a general personality trait model, but there was a massive backlash from clinicians like John Gunderson, who was the heavyweight of personality disorders. He basically said, you cannot remove this. It is a distinct clinical entity that ruins lives.
So the old guard fought back.
And they won, for the most part. It stayed. But the debate highlighted this huge shift in how we think about mental health. Categorical versus dimensional.
Explain that distinction. Categorical meaning you either have it or you don't.
Right. The DSM-5, the old guard, is categorical. It's a toggle switch. You need to meet 5 out of 9 criteria. If you have 4, you don't have the disorder. You're healthy. If you have 5, you do. You're sick.
Which seems so arbitrary. If I have 4 severe symptoms, I'm probably still a problem.
Exactly. That's the flaw. So the new way, which is represented by the ICD-11, that's the World Health Organization's manual, is dimensional. It's like a dimmer switch. They essentially got rid of the specific labels like narcissist or borderline. Now you just have personality disorder, and it's classified by severity, mild, moderate, or severe.
So you don't get diagnosed with NPD in the ICD-11.
Technically, no. You get diagnosed with a personality disorder with prominent traits of dissociality, which covers the grandiosity and attention-seeking, and negative affectivity, which covers the vulnerable neurotic side.
That feels less satisfying somehow.
Yeah.
Dissociality doesn't have the same ring as narcissist.
It doesn't, but it's probably more scientifically accurate. It captures the nuance, because people rarely fit perfectly into one box. The ICD-11 recognizes that narcissism is a spectrum of traits, self-centeredness, lack of empathy, that can exist at different intensities.
There's also mention of the alternative model, or AMPD, in the back of the DSM-5.
A hybrid. This is where the compromise landed. It sits in Section 3 of the manual, the Emerging Measures section. And it defines MPD by impairments in functioning in identity, self-direction, empathy, and intimacy. It asks, can this person form an identity without constant external validation? Can they be intimate? It's a much more functional way of looking at the problem than just counting symptoms like has a sense of entitlement.
Let's pivot to what it's actually like to be this person, or maybe more importantly for many listeners, to be in a relationship with them. The lived experience. We talked about supply.
Narcissistic supply. This is a concept by Otto Fenichel. Think of it as fuel. The narcissist has a leaking tank of self-esteem. They cannot generate self-worth internally. You and I, hopefully, can wake up and feel okay about ourselves just because they can't.
So they need the gas station.
They need a constant inflow of admiration, attention, or even fear from others to keep the tank full. Without supply, they crash into depression or rage.
And when the tank is empty or threatened, that's where we get narcissistic rage.
Heinz Kohut's term. And this isn't just getting mad because you lost your keys. This is a reaction to a narcissistic injury. If you criticize them or even just ignore them, it cracks their reality. The rage is a defense mechanism. It can range from icy aloofness, the silent treatment, which is a form of punishment, to violent outbursts. The goal is to destroy the threat, which is you, and restore their sense of superiority.
And in relationships, this plays out in a predictable cycle.
The cycle of idealization and devaluation. This is classic. In the beginning, they idealize you. You are the perfect partner, the perfect employee. They love bomb you.
Why do they do that? Is it just manipulative?
It can be, but often they actually believe it. Because if you are perfect and they chose you, well, that proves they are perfect. You're a trophy. Look at this amazing person I acquired.
But reality sets in. I can't be perfect forever.
Right. You make a mistake, you have a bad day, you have a need of your own. And because they split, meaning they see people as all good or all bad, you are suddenly devalued. You go from being an angel to being worthless. There is no middle ground. They can't integrate the good and the bad.
That splitting concept explains so much. It's why you can't reason with them. You say, but I did 10 good things yesterday, and they look at you like, doesn't matter, you did one bad thing today, so you are entirely bad.
Exactly. It's binary. And boundaries, they don't exist. To a narcissist, you are an extension of them. Why would my arm have a boundary against me? Why would my arm have a private diary? They view people as objects, self-objects, to be used for their own regulation.
The source material touches on mate selection. This is the part that might hit home for some of the single people listening. It says cluster B traits might actually increase short-term mating success.
This is the evolutionary hook. Why hasn't this disorder been bred out of the population? Well, look at the traits. Confidence, boldness, risk-taking, surface-level charm. These are attractive traits initially.
Okay, that bad boy appeal.
Absolutely. If you meet a grandiose narcissist at a bar, they are charming, they buy the drinks, they tell the best stories, they look like a high-value mate, they sweep you off your feet.
But it's a trap.
It's a short-term strategy. It works for the first date or the first month. It gets the genes passed on. But long-term, the lack of empathy and the exploitation lead to relationship failure. But from a purely evolutionary standpoint, if they've already had the kid, the genes are passed.
So what's the prognosis? Can it be fixed? The sources mention a treatment gap.
It's massive. People with NPD rarely walk into a clinic and say, "Doc, I think I'm a narcissist." Why would they? In their mind, they are perfect. The world is the problem. My wife is the problem. My boss is the problem.
So why do they end up in therapy at all?
They go for the comorbidities. They go because they're depressed, which is usually the vulnerable types, or they have bipolar disorder, or, and this is specifically noted, substance abuse. Cocaine is specifically mentioned in the sources as a common comorbidity.
That fits the grandiose profile, the drug of confidence for the person who's addicted to confidence.
It really does. But when they get into therapy, it's incredibly difficult. They struggle to form a therapeutic alliance. They often devalue the therapist. "What do you know? I'm smarter than you. Your degree is from a state school." Or they try to charm the therapist to validate them.
Are there therapies that work? Or is it hopeless?
It's not hopeless, but it is very hard. There are approaches. Psychoanalytic therapy, specifically transference-focused psychotherapy, tries to help them integrate those split parts of themselves to see that they can be flawed and still be lovable. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, and schema therapy are also used, but the outcome data is sparse. There's no cure, and the dropout rates are very high. Once the therapist really challenges them, they often just quit.
What happens when a narcissist gets old? We always picture the young, hotshot narcissist, but what about the 80-year-old narcissist?
It's a grim picture. Grandiosity is hard to maintain when you lose your looks, your job, your status. When you retire and nobody laughs at your jokes because you're not the boss anymore, the supply gets cut off.
The tank runs dry.
The source material suggests the grandiosity might fade, but the narcissistic scarring, that was Freud's concept, remains. They might become bitter, isolated, hypochondriacs, complaining constantly about their health to gain attention because they can no longer command admiration through achievement. It's a very lonely end.
That is a heavy reality. It really reframes the whole villain narrative.
It does.
So synthesizing this whole deep dive, we've gone from Ovid's myth all the way to brain scans.
We've seen that NPD is a brain structure issue, a failure of the salience network. It's a genetic roll of the dice. And it is, at its core, a tragic inability to connect with the human experience of others.
And it's not just the movie villain. It's the vulnerable narcissist, hiding in shyness and resentment, suffering from oxidative stress and neuroticism.
Exactly. It's easy to demonize the behavior, and we absolutely should protect ourselves from the abuse. But when you look at the mechanism, you see a person who is frantically delusionally trying to prop up a fragile self that is constantly threatening to collapse.
I want to leave the listener with a thought based on that evolutionary theory you mentioned. If narcissism leads to short-term mating success, if the charming, arrogant people are the ones getting the dates and passing on their genes, are we evolving to be more narcissistic?
That is the provocative question. If our society values the superficial, the selfie, the self-promotion, the personal brand, and if those traits are rewarded with attention and reproductive success, are we selecting for these genes? Are we building a world that looks more and more like the medial prefrontal cortex of a narcissist?
A chilling thought to end on. Look closer at the behaviors around you. Look at the motivations, and perhaps look in the mirror, not to fall in love, like Narcissus, but to understand what you see.
Well said.
That's our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.